one of the reasons that we wanted to get everybody together is that both Chris and I think that this is one of the reasons that this really matters is that
Hmm.
it's especially now, if you are on LinkedIn and you are in the volunteer sector, you hear so many people talking about the future of volunteering and how we're going to be doing
Hmm.
volunteering and how it should be set up and all the different ways that we're talking about getting more hours, I think is a really big thing that we're hearing about. But one of the things that I would like to hear more is the kind of things that Cole is talking about is like, how do we get more quality out of these relationships? How do we get people sort of interacting with each other in place, building not only sustainable, but durable, community focused sort of ideas? And this just felt like a really interesting one to socialize with the group, learn a little bit more about, and then ask some questions about the how of it could be better, more scalable, whatever it is that Cole wants to know.
Hmm.
As we really want to, I think, on some ways, lean into this connection piece that really happens when you're doing things together in person, collaborating on a shared outcome. So I think it's really important that we focus on these kind of conversations too. And so, Cole, this is a really good example of it. We want
Yeah.
to center showcase it for you.
And I'll kick this off by saying, in the midst of a pretty challenging time, finding groups like this is what's kept me from, drowning emotionally and spiritually and financially. Um, and so the road trip, which sounds very similar to Amber, what you were doing as a much younger person, was just sort of a return to that to me. That I thought we're hearing these voices from what's commonly referred to as the coastal elites. That this is how you make your case for to argue what's important. And I thought that's wrong. What we need to do is we have millions of people who make a difference in communities. And much like Nikki, I've thought we need to put a microphone in front of these people and have them tell their stories. And so that's how I met many of you. And that's how I'm delighted to kind of move through this work. I want to say that I come from this national service field, and that animated my early career. I wanted very much to be the person who invented ways for other people to make a difference. And I happened to do that, I happened to come from the late 20th century. And so during the 90s, there was this reinvention from a Peace Corps Vista model of service, which is, you're going to parachute outsiders into communities, and they're going to somehow be the catalyst for community change. And it's kind of amusing even to think about today, but at the time, this was a really great idea. And in the 90s, somebody said, what if we got together and did that in teams? So, what we'll do is we'll parachute teams of people into these communities. And some of them may be local and some of them may be outsiders. And we'll infuse these local organizations with this people power. And we'll build these systems where local groups and national groups will come together and we'll, you know, um, essentially staff community change. And there's good and bad to that. I've spent 30 years working on this and building these systems, and we've done many things that I'm very, very proud of. And certainly I think it did work as a workforce development tool for change, and many of us came up through that. And if you'll allow it, Sarah, where did you serve? What did you do?
I was with the state national program. So I served with an organization called Boys Hope, Girls Hope.
Oh, I know it. Yeah,
Yeah.
cool. Well, thank you for doing that. That's awesome. Um, so I think what was really important 30 years ago is there was a lot of investment in leadership training, and we had huge. There were we had a campus at the Presidio that we used for this in San Francisco, and we had these big leadership retreats. And a lot of the leadership development was this project management stuff, like how can you, get people in a room and do things a certain way. And some of this was really good. Some of the things that we got wrong, I think, are that we built systems that reflected a dominant culture, and we trained people to be bureaucrats. And the people who got the money were the people who, jumped through the hoops and colored in the lines. And there's a lot of folks who can write really good grant reports, but there have been some challenges about turning everybody into bureaucrats, and not everything has worked. Our local friend in Baltimore, Brian Pham, talks about parity and this notion that it's not that my glass is full and yours is empty, and I'm going to pour out of myself into you. I'll tell you, I had the experience. Real quick story. When in 1995, when I was in my 20s and I started as an AmeriCorps program director, and I came to Baltimore, and this was great. I pick up the phone, and the first call I make is to somebody in Allegheny County, which is in Appalachia. And I said, Connie, I'm here. I'm doing this job, and I'm gonna bring, we're gonna have AmeriCorps members, and we're gonna end homelessness. We didn't quite do that. And Connie yells at me for 45 minutes about, you people in Baltimore don't know what our lives are like out here. And I thought, oh, I got lost on my way to work. I don't know anything about Baltimore. So I pick up the next call, and it's to Baltimore City Department of Social Services. And they're like, you people in Washington don't know about our lives here. And I thought, oh, okay. I see what's happening here. I get this now. Okay. I think these systems the systems that we built in not valuing what's local and not honoring who's already doing things manifest themselves in some sort of BS kind of we reinforce things that aren't true. And so, yeah, this is a study I'm just showing you that says that whites with a college degree volunteer more than African Americans, and I'm like, that's just not true. It's just ridiculous. But our systems show us that the way that people matter, or the way that they serve each other, has to be through the systems we built to do that. And I think that's ridiculous. So what I've been working on is taking some of these leadership development classes and saying, how do we amplify who's already doing great work, so that we can get their voices out there, and how do we connect them in a way that we can solve things together, and how do we launch greater impact and greater collective impact by building what's there through that. One example of the most, clearly the most successful example of the Community Leadership Lab comes from Cecil County, where Krista and I have been doing this together. I think the reason it works is that everybody respects the convener. And when I say respects the convener, people love Krista. And when she says, this is what we're doing, everybody in the community says, we're here for it. And she is um, as, as emotionally intelligent as there is. And she's just a genius of connection. And I know that she's just going to totally give me a hard time about this. But anyhow, we did some things that really, really worked well. We involved some policymakers in giving briefings to our community leaders, and then we told the community leaders, you're the ambassadors, you're our advisors, and we're going to invest in your ideas. So whatever it is that you want to accomplish, we're going to fund and we're going to support. And so that's real high level briefings and trainings. It's a cohort thing. It's treating people in community like they're the experts, because obviously they know what they're going through better than we are. Moving from place to place. And I happen to think a meal works pretty well. And there's, yeah, real quick, the Stan and Glenda story. Kristen and I talk about this a lot, that we had an experience doing this where you can see Stan and Glenda off there to the right, where Glenda Lewis comes in and says, I have decided that I'm going to run an after school program at Zion AME, and I need money to pay for food for the kids. And Stan says, let me go to the American Legion and get the money from the slot machines. Yeah, and when that happened, I thought that we have done something here that's unusual in community. We've brought together people who don't talk to each other in their daily lives, and they're talking about how they're going to solve a problem. Not everything works, but some things do, and some things work when there's connection. Connection is the antidote to disconnection. these are charts and slides that say what we do, how we do it, what the trainings are like. And forgive me, I want to send you these notes so you can see them, but I'm not going to read to you about them. One thing I do like is an equity and innovation fund. And Trey, I don't know if how much of this you've seen. We do this with Trey and I both teach um, CFDI. That's what is it? Community Financial Development Institute. Is that right? Institutions.
I think that's right.
Um, so these are AmeriCorps members serving with a group called LISC and also some HBCU interns who are entry level folks. And we've done this project with them when we're teaching them about project management. We don't do it with um, sort of random and hypothetical situations. We say, do the community listening that you need to do, come back, bring us an idea, and the best ideas get funded. And it's been endlessly astonishing and what we've generated out of that, and that's been great fun. Um, we've tried these community. I want to say that I'm about 15 in on, taking this series of webinars or series of deliverables. We get people out of the conference room into communities and teach them about active listening, teach them about finding the bright spots, about who are the community heroes, how do you listen to them, and how do you learn more about them. And actually, let me pause for a sec and throw it to Krista. Krista, is there anything that you would add to what I've presented thus far?
No, you've captured it quite well. You know, and every class that we've had, there's a different type of energy and experience in the room, and you can lay your plans out at the beginning of your program, but you constantly have to shift. And Cole does that quite well, and can just kind of say, okay, I think I was going to do this today, but now I'm going to go, because people are concerned about something comes up and everybody's onto it. And you pivot quite well and meeting the needs of the people that are in the room, which shows to me, that shows a great level of respect for people, especially those that are over the age of 55, 60, 65, because that was our target audience. So
and you're in to be, and thank you, I appreciate the compliment, but to be fair, I think one of the things I'm particularly proud of is that we ran it 3 times with me, and now you're running it without me. You don't need me.
well, it's not so much we don't need you. I mean, you're
It's we
welcome
don't want you.
anytime. No.
Your shit don't work anymore.
No, it's just, things kind of change. The needs that we're trying to pay attention to, the needs of the community, what you're saying about, that listen to what's going on to your neighbors and what they want. And
But
that's what we try to do.
And I like the idea that we got it right. We refined it, and then you don't need the facilitator because we got this on our own. It's got a nice flywheel kind of situation to it. So some of the things that make this work, and this gets to the wonderful questions that Tim put out there, is that I think certainly the cohort piece works. It's interesting when people have sort of a common experience that we are all of a profession trying to do things, or we are all of a community trying to do things. I like doing it in person. It's been fine online. But I will stipulate 2 things. One is that my work is whatever people, it's sometimes I go out and invent what I'm doing next, but sometimes I respond to what somebody comes to me with. And so I've never sat down and said, I'm going to package this and launch it and promote it across the country. And that I think is something um, which is a crying shame, because what Krista and I invented and then what we developed with Lisk and what we've done in other places, I really think this works, and I really think that we could take it to different places. I'm not precisely sure who, and I'm not precisely sure how. And that's kind of what I wanted to bring to this group. So we've got a proof of concept, but the question is, how do we sort of export it and bring it to people? How do we make sure that we can keep the quality? And well, I don't know, actually, Tim, at this point, you did a really good job framing these questions. The more I talk, the less I listen. So let me actually ask you to facilitate from here.
Before we do that, Cole, and could you just really quickly go through, because one of the first times that I got super excited about this when we were having hot dogs, sausages here, Polish boys.
Polish boys.
Just really quickly, like the 6 labs sort of in order, because I just thought that was a really interesting sort of journey, just like super quick, like high level of what they are. And then I think that helps everybody sort of have the context of what it does.
Sure. So, and that's useful. So there's some things that you've seen before, and that a lot of folks have seen before in terms of leadership training, and there's definitely some greatest hits. How does project planning work? How does decision making work in groups? How do people listen and receive feedback? These things are fairly common. You referred to the leadership compass as sort of a sorting hat, which I thought was great. So, if we're going to nerd out and use Harry Potter references, people need to know what they're good at and how to amplify what other people are good at and how to bring out the best in each other. So we spend some time on that. Some things that we do differently than most leadership trainings is that we get out of the conference room and we meet people where they are, which I think most people don't. I think that most leadership trainings are, let's go to a retreat and let's have this beautiful space that has nothing to do with our community, and then talk about bright spots and asset mapping and these things. So we have grown adept at actually doing the asset mapping in real time. I think another thing that we do particularly well around, as I mentioned, the project planning, is that we do actual project planning around actual needs. So in Cecil, there have been issues about disengagement of opportunity youth, young people not having work or school or places to go. I regret to inform you that being between Philadelphia and Baltimore makes for a lot of fentanyl running through Cecil County where Krista is. And so the community has said, what the hell do we do about this? So real world scenarios and real world community solutions, I think, are something that we're bringing to the table. And I'm super fond of the Equity and Innovation Fund being a way that when people have said, I'm going to pay you this much money to do this, I'll routinely say, only if you'll let me throw, $1,000 towards people's ideas and match it. If we're going to, if we mean to do real work, then the Equity and Innovation Fund has got to be a part of this, because we have to train people to be able to pitch and write grants and do things like that. So having them go through that process then launches them into their next phase as good grant writers and good advocates.
Thanks. Cole, I don't know if you can see the chat. So if not, then what I'll do is I can go through them. Amber, do you want to, starting at the top, talk a little bit about what you meant by community engagement boards? And I think that might have been contextually relevant in a moment in time.
It was. My apologies. I wanted to write it down before I forgot it. But I served on my City of Raleigh's Community Engagement Board, which was created in an effort to help people engage with specifically city processes more. Come speak at council meetings, how to do that, et cetera. And I was just thinking of that as a vehicle for something like this, because the group I was a part of, I think, would have gravitated towards this sort of approach and been maybe a good facilitator. Those boards are made up of just people, citizens, not necessarily, they're like guided and supported by city staff and officials, but they're run by everyday people like myself. So I was just thinking of that in the moment as a home.
Okay.
Thanks, Amber.
Sure.
Sarah, I see you're next, and you got samed by a couple people. The curious what philanthropy's response has been to these labs.
Yeah, just curious, Cole, if you can talk about your interactions with philanthropy and what you're receiving or hearing.
Geez, I've spoken with a few people. I get a lot of pats on the back. This is really nice kind of thing. Um, yeah, I haven't, that's a good question. And when I say, I've spoken with people, I mean like, 4 different philanthropies and not in a very targeted, like, hey, I've got to get to 12 people with these outcomes but in this amount of time. Um, I've generally received some lighthearted interest and attaboys, but that's about it. And Chip and the well, we'll get to the Chip and Dan Heath stuff in a second.
No, go ahead. You can jump in wherever you see it.
Yeah, and we're talking about yeah, so geez, there is some looking at it. I don't have my copy. My copy's in the other room, but
Looking
but
for
my
Switch.
yeah, my well-leafed I have many we've used Switch a lot. I'm actually an acolyte of Becky Margiotta, if you know Becky. She's runs something called the Billions Institute, which is training for people to perform and conduct large-scale social change, and she's amazing. And she just kind of hangs out with Chip and Dan. I merely read what they write, but she's like
Is this a friend of yours, and can you introduce me?
yeah, I can totally. Well,
Oh,
we
I
can,
was
yeah,
just
for
kidding.
sure. No,
Okay.
yeah, and the answer is absolutely. But
No, well, you just
she
kept saying
does
bright
things like this too.
spots, so I was
Yeah.
just thinking of that. I didn't have any other broader point other than just
Mhm.
acknowledging the reference.
There's a lot of it's interesting how many people have reached sort of the same conclusions on things. But there's a story in Switch where somebody sits down with young people and says, "What would it take you to not leave South Dakota?" And everybody says, "Well, if it was nicer here, we would do X, Y, and Z." And then the community just gets together and does that and creates jobs for the young people, and they get rid of this. That we do a lot of that here. That's sort of what we've been able to do. Did a really good one in 1 or 2 of them in the Homewood neighborhood of Pittsburgh. And I'll tell you a quick story about the equity grant. This woman here, okay, the woman here who's not looking at the camera, her name is Janie, and she's terrific. She said, "I need $120 for knitting needles," and I said, "Explain to me why we're we're going to develop equity with knitting needles." And she said, "Well." When I'm tutoring in Westinghouse grade school, young people come up to me and say, I want to learn to knit like you knit. And she says, there's just something fantastic about knitting that makes 10-year-olds in Homewood, Pittsburgh want to knit. And I said, there's nothing about knitting at all. It's you. You young people gravitate to you and you're magnetic, and here's $120 so you can get as many knitting needles as you can get because we're going to do this. But it's an example that we can activate and transform lives just with very, very small pots of money.
Cole, could you go back to the slide about what makes the labs sort of special? So the lab in a nutshell, I remember thinking when you and I were talking, the thing that really struck me about this, and I might just be the newbie in the room, was the very intentional going into a community, listening to the community, actually making it a movable feast of being in different sort of partner spaces over the course of it. So it wasn't like there was one place that sort of owned this lab. It was, we're all going to go look and sort of share and see each other's things where they live in the space. We're going to get a tour of the community by the people who are supporting the community. And I know even here in Cleveland, that would be a huge win because East Cleveland and West Cleveland, they don't actually interact with each other. and South Cleveland, nobody even knows they exist. So even just getting people to sort of see each other's things and taking them on that journey, not only through the process, but through their own city or through their own community, all of that felt really sort of like special and interesting to me. And I was wondering, Sarah, like what it was that you saw that made you want to ask Cole about working with Weave, the social fabric, like what sort of was reminiscent of what Cole's doing in Weave that made you wonder about that?
The community centeredness of it and the mini grants that are offered, and just how you're trying to pull people who might not ordinarily converge or talk with each other or get to know each other. I see overlaps.
Gotta look into that.
Yeah, I love that associative stuff, right? Like the stuff that, Cole's working on his own thing really hard, and then other people look at it and have you thought about this? And have you thought about this other person? And oh, it reminds me of, and that's one of the things that I think is really lovely about getting a bunch of makers around a table looking at a thing, is that Cole is so focused on building this that other people might see uses or connections to other ideas. Cole, I don't know if you saw in there also, and I think the answer is yes, but I'd be curious to sort of hear a little bit more. But Amber, you said curious if community nonprofits do play a role or if trust issues or barriers.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
As a volunteerism nerd, I guess, like many of you, I understand that institutional trust could be playing a role in someone's participation in some form of service, and, may or may not be heavily contributing to the rise of informal volunteering compared to formal volunteering. And so I'm just curious how that dynamic has, if it has emerged in this work. Do you have organizations trying to be a part of these groups, or trying to support or not support in some kind of way? Do they see it in conflict? Do they see it in partnership? I'm just curious, like in the ecosystem, do those organizations fit somewhere in your view?
Yeah,
And
that's a wonderful question. I'll give you two examples. One of the things that we hear a lot when we do this, and I don't know if you ever get this, I get whenever you bring together groups of people and you say this is what's going on, I routinely get somebody who gets angry about it and says, how come I didn't know about this? And the whole how come I didn't know about this thing kind of throws me, because I think, well, we're telling you. I mean, I'm telling you now. I mean, I'm not responsible for you not having known it, but it's an interesting question. There is that kind of tension about, and in some places, I've done a lot of work with a group called Baltimore Core, and they say, we're going to come into a new community, and when you come into a new community, everybody's like, what the hell are you doing here? We already got people. We don't. There's some challenge around that. But this is a good moment too to talk about, Krista, this is where we talk about speed dating and the Paris Foundation and how we invite our nonprofit partners to compete for the volunteers. Like, hey, we got some total badass change makers here, and they're trained and they're committed. So now you want them, kind of, instead of saying, hey, go to a web, that kind of thing. So Krista, speak to that.
Yeah, we've incorporated a session where there's speed dating. Many of you who've dealt with volunteer engagement, all about volunteer fairs and recruitment fairs, and that's not it. It's having those one-on-one conversations and preparing organizations to have a list of things that they need done, or their wish list of, hey, if I had a change maker like you, this is what I would have them do. But we've had some very good buy-in from our nonprofit community on our model here, and we invite them to be speakers and presenters, and to talk about their work and to talk about the issue at hand, because they are the experts on the challenges in our county, not me.
Mhm.
They are, and they know the statistics, and they also know the resources and how needs are being met or are not being met. So I am very fortunate where I land in county government that there are a lot of good relationships with those nonprofit partners already.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, Amber, one of the things that definitely a lesson here is that if yeah, this is not exactly a profound insight, but yeah, you need the convener. There's no way in the world that I can say, I was born in Cleveland, but I'm not going to show up tomorrow and say, hey, everybody, I'm going to find the 20 community leaders in Cleveland. I can't do that. And if you don't have, a respected convener or organizational buy-in, it's an interesting sort of thing. What we're trying to do here is to say you already have the talent. The talent's there. The opportunity isn't, but the talent's there. So let's build the opportunity and let's quit treating people like if we give them a website and a room full of letters to and envelopes to stuff. I mean, people want to do higher level stuff.
Cool. I'm going down through the list. I'm just going to keep doing that because that's
Mhm.
easy. And we're kind of coming up on pretty close to 10 minutes left. But Emily, you did a two-parter. You asked and then you responded. So if you could sort of weave all that into one question, that would be awesome.
Yeah, I asked and then I added on to it. But Cole, I was wondering, how do you decide which communities to go into? Do you have like existing connections in different towns or cities, or do you identify maybe like a larger issue that the org seems equipped to address and then
Mhm.
go in from there? And then my second part was, how do you actually find and connect with the everyday community members? I mean, like, do you access them through churches or existing groups? Is there some kind of call to contribute, and how does that work?
Yeah, so that's an excellent question. And one of the things this is something that has kind of haunted me for a long time. I have been blessed over the 12 to 15 years that I've been a practitioner to have people. I do my work, I have my network, and people approach me, and I go work for them. And it turns out that doesn't. That's that marketing is occasionally necessary and outreach is important. So I have worked largely in the national service field and made a reputation in that field and have developed relationships and clients out of that. It is also true that those organizations, like many others, are now absolutely bereft of capacity and funding. And so my home base is gone. So I've not actually had to advertise. And this is embarrassing to say out loud, but one of the things that I'm developing and one of the things I'm learning about in this phase of my career and in my work is what would that look like and how do I go about doing it? The answer to the question of where do you find people um, is exactly precisely what the work is. The work is when you're in a community, um, you do go door to door and you do listen and you find out who's respected and you find out who's trusted. Now, many of the nonprofit professionals I work with are extremely agile and adept at doing this. But generally speaking, you run into a lot of nonprofits where all they do is talk to each other all day. Um, and even like you'll go to the neighborhood resource center and they'll say, "All right, everybody, our daily meeting starts at 9." I'm like, "Daily meeting? What the hell? I mean, what are you doing?" So it is. That's functionally that's the work. I mean, finding your local heroes is um, why you need a strong convener, and that's what it's not just a matter of posting this and saying, all right, we're going to do this on Thursday, and on Friday people show up.
Interesting. Um, Okay, so I'm going to try and weave some of these questions together since we're kind of coming up on the end, Cole. And I think, everybody, please feel free to stay in touch and keep this conversation going. But I think a question that I'm sort of kind of thinking about blending together from Amber and Chris with his ask too, and I think you were just kind of getting at it is, and I think even Trey sort of is offering a suggestion into it, is are there ways to, rather than find the need to have somebody that you can resource to gather people, to find groups, to lean on people to point to groups that already exist, that are sort of ready to have this conversation so that you're starting further along on the journey with somebody who's like already kind of there. Yes, Chris.
And I'll just add to that because fundamentally that gets where I was wondering too. So I went to a Fells Point community meeting last night. It was a number of folks who were just a little bit older than me, talking about, yeah, just it wasn't. It was like the elected officials. A couple of them were sort of talking about their work, which is really boring because they were just talking about weird legislation and stuff. And then everybody else was asking pretty weird questions like, well, why does a 3-story building get 2 parking spaces? Shouldn't they get 3? Like, okay, you know what? There's a lot more critical topics here, but I don't know if they know how to organize into anything more substantial. And it certainly didn't feel like a community meeting. It felt like a report out to people who left Fox News to come over to this. They're all Democrats, but they're the Democrat version of a Fox News viewer. I'm working my way towards that myself, so that's not no disrespect there, but you know what I mean? Like it felt like a lot of time on the small things that I don't mean to question them or the legitimacy, and I don't mean to belittle, but just so we can all kind of picture the dynamic in our mind.
Yeah. Hey, Chris, when we were together in your kitchen and you were making very, very good crispy eggs, there was a lot of conversation about how if we bring together the right group and we sit them down and we give them the space to talk, that the solutions will manifest. And
Yeah.
I think that that's largely true, but not entirely true. I think that people need you have to shape the path to go all Chip and Dan Heath. You have to, I mean, there's ways to develop interaction and teach some basic skills so that people can do this. And that's, I think, what we're about. I would never ever say, let's go into a group of, justice involved youth and say, reinvent, Southeast Baltimore and just assume that we could do that. I think we would have to teach them how to do it and then give them the tools and the resources to do it, if that makes sense.
But if Fells Point, if I said, hey, listen, we can do better than this, we can actually create a group of civic engagement and actually make some things happen. I know a guy. Do you ever find yourself invited into those kind of situations?
Yeah. So this kind of, I think, gets to what Emily was asking. Very often when people approach me and say, we need this, I'll say, can I do this too? I got this idea, I've got this thing. And so that's how Pittsburgh came about. That's how, and some of the Equity and Innovation Fund, this is not terribly profound, but that came about because I was running an AmeriCorps program and a person who was a fundraiser asked my AmeriCorps members, what would it cost to blow the doors off your project? And the answer was $150. And I thought, no, that can't be true. I mean, it's got to be 10,000. It's got to be 15,000. And the answer was, no, man, if I had gas money, I told you the story. I could, that I could teach the Lakota Sioux, we'll write wills and then people will have control over their assets. I mean, if I had a portable printer, I could help people become citizens. This is amazing stuff. And so, yeah, no, I've been blessed to be able to say to people, you're saying you want this, but I think I know how to get at it, and it's this.
All right. I want to be aware and honor time here, but Trey, I wanted you to just say hi, since I haven't heard you in the conversation yet. And sort of, I saw Amber sort of say the same thing too, but what is the Volunteer Center Network? What are you talking about there?
So the volunteer center network, we're thinking about. I was more so thinking about the hands. Well, the not. I guess the points of light volunteer centers. There should be one in this about every state. Still, is that the case, Amber? I haven't been at points of light in 6 years.
Yeah, there's I think over 100 affiliates.
Right.
Yeah.
And so so if you think about there is a major hub that basically organizes volunteer efforts for the major city or for even the rural area. And so thinking about, they may have, as Amber was saying, they may already have the infrastructure. And I immediately start thinking about Hands on Atlanta here in my city, because I remember when we put that together, the idea was if it to do something similar to this, but it does not have this component. This, I see this as, even part of like this adding on as like the capstone to what they're doing. Now go out and do it. And I think this model can be a good kind of addition to it, if not even a standalone for some of them that already, like, what do we do with this? If the program is already, if it's feeling kind of dead, or it feels like it's anticlimactic at the end, like, this is something that that would be a good for a boost, in my opinion.
Thank you, Trey. So all this, if I'm going to be a good synthesizer, Cole, and I would love for folks to, again, continue this conversation offline, if that strikes you. I just, when you said marketing, the thing that this really strikes me here is that you've got a fantastic process. And what marketing a process, or you're trying to solve the problem, right? So it feels like the easiest path forward for go-to market here is, right, you've got a group of people, you've got sort of a shared urgency around a thing, and you've got a respected convener.
Yeah. Okay.
And that figuring out where those three pieces overlap, and the only thing they really like, they've got the people, they've got the desire, they've got the person that they're going to listen to. They just wish they knew like how to work together efficiently. This feels like a really interesting thing to be able to offer those folks. So now the question in some ways becomes less how do you explain this to everybody, but more how do you find those people who are so primed to want to sort of engage with it because they see the need that they have. Like they say in marketing, right? Nobody wants a drill. Everybody just knows they want a hole. So find people who are sort of standing there working on their house and they need that spot put in there. And it feels like the group of people, the respected convener, the sense that we could only do something if we had the right sort of process. And then other people might follow. But that's sort of what I'm hearing out of it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I'm sure I'm not the only one who's got a hot take on that. But I did want to sort of just quickly close this out and say thank you to everybody. You can certainly find other of these things on the calendar. There's a LinkedIn group if you want, just feel free to be in touch. And Cole, I don't know if you wanted to sort of say a last thing to everybody before we close out too.
Just that, just to reiterate what I came up with at first, I'm very much, my brain's a BB in a boxcar, and I'm very much kind of focused on what I'm thinking. To have your voices and your care is just remarkable to me, and so it's I am just so happy to play in your sandbox, and thanks for sharing your ideas.
All right, thanks everybody. Really appreciate you being here. That's it.
How do I save the chat, man? I gotta hear these.
Chris will do it. Chris has got it.
Thank you all.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks. See you guys, everybody. Nice
Thanks.
meeting you.
Take care.